Well, good morning, Stephen. Good to see you.
Good morning, Sherron. A pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm looking forward to the day when this is all back in person. But I want to applaud your amazing work for the cause of the whistleblower, and just wanted to ask you a few questions today.
Great, thank you. And Sherron, it's an honor to be questioned by you. What you did for corporate whistleblowers, you changed the entire world for corporate whistleblowers. And I just want to thank you. We were there when your case broke, and we were able to use it in Congress effectively to call attention to the problems that Wall Street whistleblowers faced. And it really triggered a series of reforms. So, you know, beyond what you did on Enron, your legacy has helped every investor and I think every whistleblower on Wall Street. Thanks.
Well, thank you. But I also have to say that, you know, if you weren't there to have pointed out that Ken Lay looked into firing me, it might have gone unnoticed. And speaking of your good eagle eye on pointing out laws and situations that protect the whistleblower, I'd really like to ask you how National Whistleblower Day came about, and the origins of this fantastic set of laws that help protect whistleblowers.
Sure. So National Whistleblower Day actually came to being when the Supreme Court was reviewing a challenge to the constitutionality of the False Claims Act. So the False Claims Act empowers citizens to help the government enforce the law. It has qui tam, in the name of the king. And the Chamber of Commerce and corporate interests were arguing that no, that's not the job of the citizen. That's the job of the government. The government has the authority to enforce the laws, not people. I viewed that as completely ridiculous, that the whole essence of democracy was to empower the people, and the people are part of the government. So I asked my law clerks, I said, find me an example from the American Revolution where the Continental Congress called upon the people to enforce the laws and help protect the integrity of the government. And we were preparing a brief, what's known as an amicus brief, to the Supreme Court. And the law clerks went out and someone found this law that was passed on what we now call Whistleblower Day on July 30th, 1778, at the height of the American Revolution.
Wow. So I actually was unaware that July 30th was the actual day. What happened in 1778, July 30th?
Well, that's the first thing we found. On that day, the Continental Congress got together and passed a whistleblower law. And it could read like a law passed today. And it was like, whoa, this is amazing, you know, that they had this foresight. And I'm just going to read to you what the law actually says. It says this: it is the duty of all persons in service of the United States, that would be like today government workers, as well as other inhabitants. And I found that amazing. They didn't say citizens, they said inhabitants. They wanted anyone in those 13 colonies to act in a certain way. And what was that? To give the earliest information to Congress. So this concept of the whistleblower's right to go to Congress, just like you went to Congress when you were going to blow the whistle on Enron, that was where you went. Well, that's where they wanted people to go in 1778. And then they said, or any other proper authority. And so that's exactly what you see in the whistleblower laws today: Congress or other proper authorities, be it the Department of Justice, the SEC. And to give information about misconduct, frauds, or misdemeanors. There's the whistleblower laws. Blow the whistle on fraud, blow the whistle on misconduct, blow the whistle on, they use the word misdemeanors or crimes. So right then and there, they were calling upon the people to do what whistleblowers do. And who was making this call? It was the founding fathers of the United States. It was the people who were constructing our new government. And when did they do it? They did it during war, at the height of the revolution. And I like to point out that, they weren't up to lose an election. They would have been hung by the British if we lost that revolution. And part of the resolution they did this law calling upon whistleblowers, calling on all inhabitants to help enforce these laws. They did two other things that were remarkable. One is they released all of these papers that the whistleblowers had turned into Congress that were embarrassing to the US government, talking about mistreatment of prisoners, talking about misconduct by the commander of the Navy. And there was no Freedom of Information Act. There was no state secret. They released it. And second, this is my favorite part, I am an attorney, they voted money to hire lawyers to represent the whistleblowers against the prosecutions they were facing in the state of Rhode Island. That occurred on July 30th, 1778, and established what I believe is the whistleblower tradition in America.
That just gives me goosebumps, because here are these founding fathers realizing we're trying to form this new country, this new government, but power corrupts, and power corrupts absolutely. So how do we protect this country from ourselves? When we become so powerful, we might start doing something wrong. So early on at our founding, they decided, let's protect people reporting wrongdoing on us.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so amazing about it. It was this recognition of the importance of oversight, of transparency, and a recognition that it was, the word they used, duty. They didn't say we encourage, and like in our modern laws, it's often, we'll protect you if you do it. These are important facets, but they went much further. They say it's your duty. And I think that also came from that these revolutionary leaders, the ones who were putting their lives on the line, the leadership of this new government, they were putting their lives on their line. I think they recognized it was their duty, to human rights, to the democratic ideals they held. And they were saying everyone shares in that duty.
That's impressive. Makes you proud to be an American.
Yeah, and I think this is the first time ever in the world that I've seen something like this. It was really amazing.
Well, and what got their attention? What had them kind of thinking about this to write this law?
Well, that's so interesting, because we filed this brief in 2000, and kind of interesting law, very inspiring. We all move on. So in 2010, I was writing the Whistleblowers Handbook. And I decided, I said, there had to be something had to have happened that made them do this. So I'm very fortunate to have had a lot of law clerks and people interested in whistleblowing, young people, students. So I gathered them all. I must have been like 5 or 6 people in my office. I said, go forth and find out what happened. Dig. This had to be something. And then they started coming back with the fruits of their research. Holy Toledo, because what happened was a real whistleblower incident. And what people were saying is what I've been hearing in my 35 years representing people. It's like, it was amazing what they turned up.
Well, what was it? Don't leave me hanging.
Don't leave me hanging. Okay, so here's what happened. In 1777, in February, this is 6 months after the Declaration of Independence is signed, the Commodore of the US Navy, this is the person appointed by the Continental Congress to be the head of our Navy. His name was Eskil Hopkins. And his brother was the former governor of Rhode Island, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. This is a powerful Rhode Island family. 10 sailors and Marines aboard a ship in Providence Harbor decided they were going to blow the whistle on this Commodore. They met secretly on a ship called the Warren, and all 10 signed a petition. And I'll just read some of it. This was from February 19, 1777. They wrote on board the ship Warren. And they said, this is a letter to Congress, "We are ready to hazard everything that is dear and necessary, and if necessary, sacrifice our lives for the welfare of our country." So remember, these are volunteers in the Continental Navy fighting the British. This isn't an exaggeration. They are risking their lives. They're in the middle of a war. For the welfare of our country, we are desirous of being active in defense of our constitutional liberties. Now that's very interesting because the US Constitution wouldn't be passed for another 15 years. Yet they were promoting this ideal that there were inherent constitutional rights that all people held. This was a philosophy of Samuel Adams and some of the revolutionary forefathers. They believed that these were inherent rights. It's reflected in the Declaration of Independence. And then that they had a right to report and expose what they called unjust tyranny and oppression. And then each of the 10 sailors and Marines signed out their own separate affidavit. And among the allegations was that the commander of the US Navy, not only being selfish and into profiteering, but also was mistreating British prisoners. And that's a big thing because that would be very embarrassing to the new revolutionary government for their own sailors to be accusing the new revolutionary movement of mistreating prisoners. This is not something that you want to put on the front page of the newspaper. They signed it out and they picked one of their members, a man named Grannis, to jump ship from Rhode Island, travel to Pennsylvania, and present the petitions to the Congress. So what happened?
So is that what happened? Did he make it to Pennsylvania?
So what happened when he jumped ship, made his way to the Continental Congress, and presented the petitions? What happened to Grannis?
And what happened to the Commodore of the Navy?
Yeah, so what happened was they accepted the petitions. They didn't freak out. They didn't say you're a traitor. They didn't say you're insubordinate. They took the petitions. The Marine Committee reviewed it. And then in a declaration signed by John Hancock, they suspended the Commodore. In other words, they listened to the whistleblowers and they suspended him. They gave him an opportunity to present his case, which he did not, and then they fired him. So what you saw was this new government accepting information from whistleblowers, listening to it, and then taking action. Well, the Commodore was not very happy, as you can imagine. So he tried to arrest all of the 10 sailors and Marines. He tried to figure out who they were and get them, retaliate.
Kill the messenger.
Exactly. He caught 2 of them in Rhode Island. Marvin and Shaw were their names, arrested them. And in those days, there was a thing called like seditious libel. You could be put in jail for libeling somebody. So he arrested them and he put him into jail to face trial in Providence, Rhode Island, again, where he had a tremendous power and influence. So this is then, we go to the next incident, which was a letter sent by Shaw and Marvin to the Congress on July 8, 1778. And this is their letter. Your petitioners not being persons of affluent fortunes. So most whistleblowers aren't very rich, but young men who have spent most of their time in service of their country in arms against cruel enemies since the commencement of the present war, finding themselves arrested for doing what they then believed and still believe was nothing but their duty. Sherron, have you ever heard a whistleblower say that?
That is amazing. And yes, they're doing their duty and they're not of affluent means. And please come help us. We're rotting away in jail.
Yeah. But how many whistleblowers have you heard say, all I did was my duty. All I was doing was my job.
It's the same story throughout, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So that's what they said. We're just doing our duty. And then just what you said, held to bail in a state where we're strangers, without connections that can assist in defending ourselves against a powerful and artful person who has the advantages of his offices. When you went against the leadership of Enron, were you in a similar position?
Oh, it's absolutely amazing. And how 2 days after I met with Ken Lay, he's asking Vincent and Elkins, the outside law firm, what are the potential consequences to discharging employees who raise accounting concerns? Can we dump her on the street, start smearing her reputation? The powerful against the powerless is a no-win situation for the whistleblower.
Exactly. And that's what, when reading their letter, the themes they were reporting and talking about, so similar to what you went through, but also what I've heard as a lawyer to so many clients and so many whistleblowers who've told me what they've experienced. And then they asked help from Congress. So that is what set up that resolution. Congress got this letter, reviewed what had happened to these whistleblowers, and that's when they passed the resolution. And that's when they released the documents. And that's when they said, we're going to hire lawyers, not just any lawyers, the best ones we can find. And they did. They found a fantastic lawyer, a man named Channing, who later would become Attorney General of Rhode Island, very good lawyer, to defend those whistleblowers. And there was a case in Rhode Island, and my fearless law clerks, I mean, you have to understand, they went to the National Archives, they went to the Rhode Island Historical Society, they're going crazy, the Library of Congress, and we actually found the complaint that had been filed against them and the not guilty verdict. The whistleblowers won their case in Rhode Island with the financial support and the documents provided by the Continental Congress. And then we went to the National Archives and found the check of $1,400 that the United States government paid. And this, to me, was just almost unbelievable, because anyone, when you study the history of the American Revolution, our government didn't have any money, and they needed every penny for bullets and guns. They were fighting for their survival. But in the middle of that, they found the resources to pay lawyers to defend the whistleblowers.
These two sailors of no means.
Yeah.
They were stuck in a Rhode Island jail with Rhode Island political family, former Commodore of the Navy, coming down on them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they put money to it. And
$1,400 back then is a lot of money.
A lot.
Have you done it what it is in today's dollars?
No, I haven't. Someone should, but it's literally, I saw the resolution that said they were going to pay the lawyers, but I just kind of, in the back of my mind was, could they really do that? It's one thing to say you're going to do it. It's another thing to actually do it. And so that's why I sent people to the National Archives to find the check, and they found the check, written to Sam Adams with a request that he would then give some of the money, a certain amount, to Cheney, the lawyer.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
That's amazing. And this is what your clerk's research folks discovered to actually help support the constitutionality of the False Claims Act.
correct. So to put it into the context, the original brief we filed in the year 2000 was just the resolution. The historical research, which we did, was done to explain what happened. And really, so therefore I could tell the story in the Whistleblower's Handbook, which is where the story's told for the first time, the whole complete story, because it had really been buried, which also to me was an interesting issue. All the things that happen in history, certain incidents get buried. It becomes convenient to forget something.
Well,
And this incident was buried. I mean, no one ever mentioned it. And it was really just, just determination to dig it out, understanding that this was precedent, that this showed what was on the minds of the founding fathers. So if anyone said whistleblowing wasn't patriotic, if anyone would say you can't use the Dodd-Frank Act to empower whistleblowers or the False Claims Act, if anyone was to challenge the new laws being passed by Congress, which are very similar to the old laws, which are to empower people, incentivize people, that we could go back and say, hey, that's what they understood. And right in that original letter of the whistleblowers are constitutional liberties as people to engage.
it's absolutely amazing. But on one hand, it's fantastic that our founding fathers supported whistleblowers, paid the legal fees to get these sailors out of jail. But on the other hand, it's a little bit depressing that you're having to find and research this and argue in support of whistleblower laws in the year 2000. Over 200 years later, there's still a squash the whistleblower dynamic, very pervasive throughout this country.
It's cultural and it's depressing. But one of the most important things and why we strongly support this Whistleblower Day movement, or we think it should become a permanent law, why we're really happy, and I think why people like Senator Charles Grassley understands its importance, until we change the attitudes towards whistleblowers, until we change the culture, until doing what our revolutionary founders thought was necessary, even in time of war, until that changes, whistleblowers will be fired, harassed, blacklisted. I mean, how have you found it since you blew the whistle? How's your employment efforts been going?
Well, yeah, exactly. I won't work in my chosen career, but it's just mind boggling how people that are even on the sidelines gravitate towards the bully, gravitate towards the powerful, and are very willing to dismiss and squash the whistleblower, the powerless.
Exactly. And that's why when we look at the new laws being passed, and they are being passed and they're very effective, these change the power relationships. They give the whistleblower confidentiality and anonymity. They give the whistleblower an opportunity to receive real compensation, real rewards. And it really, in my view, that is what happened in 1778. It was a recognition by our new government of the importance of promoting these type of disclosures. It's one thing to say, okay, good job and a slap on the back. But when you look what else they did, which was paying for the lawyers, releasing embarrassing documents, passing a resolution, you see what they're really talking about is that whistleblowing is an essential component to democracy, that without the people's ability to learn about misconduct and without people being willing to report it, that their vision of a country where all people were created equal, where all people were endowed to certain rights, would not flourish. And in many ways, they knew at the time of that revolution, it was a progress. There was slavery. There were people who opposed slavery. We actually now have looked into what was going on in Rhode Island, and the law firm that defended the whistleblowers was also one of the partners, was one of the founders of the Abolition Society in Rhode Island. Whereas Hopkins, the commander, had run a slave ship, had commanded a slave ship that was notorious, and many people died on it. So those tensions were all there. They're there, they're here today in America. But what the founding fathers understood, unless you could get the truth, unless you could get right through it. Remember, this resolution was unanimous. This wasn't debated in terms of whether it was right or wrong. Everyone, from the conservatives to the liberals, to those who had very differing visions of America, they all recognized that without the ability of the people to report misconduct, to report crimes, and without recognizing that was an essential right, the entire democratic experiment would fail.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the fact that these whistleblowers need legal support. I know from my situation, I just felt really like I was this lone fish swimming upstream with just, you know, horrible sharks coming at me. And until I was able to get a lawyer on my side, the tide didn't change. You know, the current didn't move in my favor until I had legal representation. And that's an emotional thing as well too. It's no fun to be alone. It was no fun for those sailors to be sitting in a Rhode Island jail. It really struck me that their petition was that, you know, they're not from Rhode Island. They have no connections in Rhode Island. You know, it's just a plea that we're powerless and we're going to be squashed if you don't help.
And isn't just amazing the parallels? Amazing that what they were facing was what you were facing. And it's also, I know when Congress intervened, and here's what's amazing, the parallel. Congress intervened, they held hearings about you, just like they held hearings in 1777, and they removed the commander. So they looked at it that way. And then they passed a law. That happened with you. You were why the motive behind the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, the first corporate whistleblower law. Identical. I mean, it's amazing that Congress acted in such a similar way. And then Dodd-Frank came because they looked at the first law they passed and it wasn't strong enough. So they went and they passed another one.
Yeah. Well, and it partly wasn't strong enough because sort of some unspoken actors, sort of what I consider sort of evil affront, they convinced Elaine Chao, who was Secretary of Labor, and the whistleblower retaliation protections that were put into Sarbanes-Oxley were put under the Department of Labor. They convinced her that it only applied to employees of the publicly traded parent. And most frauds happen in operating divisions. So really the whole law got misapplied for a number of years, which I think was part of the impetus of stronger whistleblower protections put into Dodd-Frank.
Well, exactly true. So what happened was Sarbanes-Oxley was a good law, but politics interfered, bad judicial decisions interfered, so they had to strengthen it. And so maybe that's the difference between what happened in 1778 and what happened in 2002 to 2010. In 1778, they did this, and then it kind of moved aside. In 2002, they passed their law, and Congress remained vigilant and got it together and said, we're going to make sure it works. And Dodd-Frank is working fantastic. We hope it expands to other areas. And history has repeated itself in a good way. But the one thing that must change is the culture and the recognition. And it's something that, as a non-whistleblower, I think I have a front seat. And my front seat is to the character of the whistleblowers I've come to know and how amazing these people are, how anyone would not want to work with them, put them in a leadership role, to have them by their side. I can't believe it. They're the strongest people, the most dedicated people, yet they're often totally shunned. And I think what the founding fathers did in 1778, they tried to shoot that message. This is the duty. They tried to tell people this isn't a choice, it's a duty. You can't shun these people. You can't put them in jail. You have to support them, even at great peril to ourselves. Because they were, that those members of the Continental Congress, they were under threat of being hung. And they served for the whistleblower.
Well, and I like the fact that they released all these documents. Like, we're not just saying this, we'll prove it. Here's all of the evidence that what they reported was true, and it needed to be said, and that abuse of power needed to be stopped.
And I in reading back some of the contemporaneous notes, the Hopkins people actually said that it was those documents that Congress released that, that's why this great commander, couldn't win his case, because Congress, released all these documents that they shouldn't have. Ha ha. It's crazy.
It is. Well, I'm so glad that the history is there. Thank you for getting it out. I'm shocked about your research law clerks, because they're reading cursive handwriting that's next to impossible to read in ancient paperwork.
Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, yeah, we were making photocopies off of whatever machines there were, and it was hard to read, but we sat and went through it all. And each time we found a new document, it was like, well, this document gives us a lead to another document. Find it. And then this document gives us a lead. And the last one we found was the check. As we slowly, first we wanted to know why, then we wanted to know who, and then we wanted to know what everyone was saying. And then I wanted to know, did they really pay? And they did.
Amazing. I'm thankful for archives and people keeping important paperwork. We do need to study our history.
Yeah. Well, Sherron, it's been a pleasure. It's always great to talk with you. You are one of my heroes, heroines. And I just think that the American people owe you a great debt. And every corporate employee owes you a debt. And why you're not on 20 corporate boards right now is an indication of where culture stands.
Wow. I appreciate your sentiments and your wonderful words. And of course, I applaud your amazing dedication to the cause of the whistleblower. You're one of my heroes.
Thank you, Sherron.